Trump's actions in total instead of in a piecemeal fashion. He writes in part, if President Trump has a modus operandi, it is the control, manipulation, and distortion of information, hiding his tax returns, meeting with Putin alone, firing the FBI director investigating him, lying habitually, undermining the media, pitting staff against each other. Our constant need to cordon off specific Trump actions from others is a red flag waving in the wind. He continues, leaders' choices produce credits and debits, and those must ultimately be reconciled. The problem in the case of the Trump administration is that its moral debits are skyrocketing, material and irreparable harm is being done to our nation, our institutions, and our norms, as well as to conservatism and the Republican Party. When the stakes are low, itemizing and compartmentalizing may be sensible, but given the enormity of the stakes, placing a gold star on the president's occasional successful assignment is unwarranted and unwise. The road to hell is paved with a piecemeal situational approach to morality. Joe, take it away.
All right, Eric, we'll start with you. 1 minute. Do you agree or disagree?
How could I agree with that, Joe? I mean, I read that and I was just blown away. You know what the piece forgets to mention is that there's a reason why Donald Trump is able to appoint a second Supreme Court justice, maybe a third in his term. Who knows? It's because he won, Joe. And the reason why he won is because he was Donald Trump. Don't forget, there were 17 conservative, very nice people, men and women on the right side who ran to be the nominee and lost to Donald Trump. So the American people, the conservative, the American people really voted for Donald Trump to win, to be their representative. And what has he done? He's brought a conservative Supreme Court going forward, at least as long as I will probably live. Maybe our children will probably live. I will tell you that's why he is Trump. And by the way, Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol was an anti-Trumper from the beginning. He was part of the Never Trump movement. So it's no surprise that the Weekly Standard does this. But that is damaging. That piece is more damaging to the GOP and conservatism than Donald Trump ever will be.
Oh, you can look at that. Right in time for Baba O'Reilly. That's pretty good. The pressure is on you now. And if I could just figure out how to stop this thing. Thank you. All right, the pressure's on you, Charlie Sykes, while I try to figure out how to stop the Who from continuing. Stop it. Good
Please
Lord.
Don't. I love
there we
that
go.
song.
There's a problem. All right, go ahead. Hey, somebody get rid of this song. Here, will you? Jeez, look at that. I know how to get it started. I just don't know how to turn it off. All right, there you go. Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, well, it's a Faustian bargain, and I do appreciate the people who, say, but Gorsuch. But the question is, what is the price? In a Faustian bargain, you get a lot of what you like, but it turns out that the price is way more than you expected. And the problem is that Trumpism is making the conservative movement in the Republican Party, it is making it dumber, crueler, more dishonest, more disconnected with reality, more extreme. I think they're going to pay a price. Look, the Republican Party and the conservative movement need to be more than a cult of personality and a slogan on a hat. And I think this is the balancing act. How much are you willing to give up? How many of your principles, how many lies are you willing to accept? How many outrages are you willing to enable and rationalize? What sort of behavior are conservatives willing to accept?
So, Charlie,
and so Eric... Yeah, so Eric, for me, there you go. For me, Eric, it was when Donald Trump very early on in December talked about a Muslim ban. And that was in December of 2015. It was pretty open and shut for me. If you're going to stop 1.5 billion people from entering the United States just because of the God they worship, I can't be a part of that candidate or that party. For others, it might have been Charlottesville. For others, it might have been when he was tweeting out fascist videos. How do you look past that?
Well, okay,
if you're a Republican?
So, Joe, as you know, what Donald Trump, the candidate, which you call a Muslim ban, actually put into play when Donald Trump, the president, was not a Muslim ban, but a moratorium, not a ban, of dangerous people coming from dangerous places with failed government. So that changed to a point where maybe it's a little bit more palatable, and the Supreme Court ended up being okay with it. Yes.
But Eric, in December of 2015, Donald Trump wasn't talking about 7 countries. He was talking about all Muslims. And my question then was, is this what Germany looked like in 1932, 1933, where Donald Trump, if he had his way, would have banned 1.5 billion people. He couldn't do it for constitutional reasons. But wasn't that a time for Republicans to stand up and say, we want no part of this guy?
Well, they did. They had the opportunity to do that, Joe. And in November of 2016, they said, en masse, we do want this guy, and we want this guy to represent us. And what ended up being in practice, you talk about the Muslim ban becoming a 6 or 7 country ban that Barack Obama's own State Department put into play. He just enforced it. And if anyone has a problem with it, then yes, for me as a conservative, I will take that because it is in the true nature of keeping America safe, the intent of what that legislation would be or that law would be.
What about Charlottesville?
What we get, listen, I can't defend Charlottesville. I cannot defend Charlottesville other than it was a moment, and I think, listen, I agree with you, that was ugly. It was ugly what was going on in Charlottesville, and there's no time to stand up for that.
What about when he denied knowing who David Duke was, and when he denied knowing what the Ku Klux Klan had done
Joe, yes,
Sunday before Super Tuesday?
He is not a fluffy, soft, lovable president, but guess what? The rest of the world knows the same thing.
Isn't it?
What's that?
Isn't that racist, though? There's a difference between not being soft and fluffy and being
Joe, fair enough.
Racist.
Fair enough to the general population, that would look like it's racism.
The Ku Klux Klan, that's a problem.
Joe,
can I weigh in on this?
Both know that Donald Trump personally. You and I both know. I will tell you unequivocally, the man is not racist. He is not a racist. We know him. We can paint him with a racist brush if we don't like his policy, but that's not who the man is. And when you dig deep into it, when you dig into the guy's heart, we know he's not racist.
Look, part of it is what are you willing to accept? How much of the racism, how much of the xenophobia, how much of the anti-Muslim bias, how much of the treatment of women? I remember when conservatives said, character matters. I remember when conservatives would have united behind, taking a hard line on a Russian attack. If Barack Obama had behaved the way that Donald Trump behaved last week, Eric Bolling's head would have exploded.
No, I think Barack Obama did lean over and say, don't worry, when I get my second term, I'll have a lot more freeway and latitude to deal with you. I remember that distinctly. You do too, Charlie.
Okay, could you let me finish once, Eric? But we criticize that. It's the reversal of the position. It's the reversal of the positions on free trade, on American leadership, on character, on corruption. Because this cult of personality, look, I understand that Donald Trump won. I understand you're getting a lot of what you want. But the transformation of the conservative movement, what he's doing to American political culture, that is also a dramatic price that we are paying for this.
Get used to it. Elections have consequences.
Guys, one at a time. One at a time. Hey, one at a time. One at a time. Let's go to Willie with the next question.
Hey, Charlie, I just want to follow up and look at some of the data that we've seen lately. Right. While the argument you're making and the argument the National Review is making may be compelling to a lot of people, it's not compelling to Republicans. Donald Trump now is rivaling George W. Bush after 9/11 in terms of his popularity within his own party. So do you think this will be persuasive to anyone?
Well, it was the Weekly Standard. Well, actually, there's no question about it that right now the Republican Party is Donald Trump's party. There's no question about it. Those of us who are conservative Trump critics are very much in the wilderness. There is no question about it. This is a party that has moved from being the party of ideas to being the party of Fox and Friends, and I understand that, which is one of the reasons why I'm making the appeal to conservatives. Who are you? Are you willing to basically take the wins that you want, but at least draw a line and say, we're not this? And with every passing week, it's going to become harder for Republicans to say, we are not looking the other way on sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. We are not the party that looks the other way on the racist dog whistles. We're not the other party that accepts this kind of dishonesty or the appeasement of the Russians. Because with every passing week, that in fact is who they are. And that is a real long-term existential danger to the Republican Party and the conservative movement.
It's not a real existential danger to the Republican Party and the new conservative movement. Low unemployment for African Americans, low unemployment for women, across the board record lows. Business attitude going forward is positive. And let's not forget one thing, Charlie. It's not just the Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump, the Republican who won, who no one else could beat Hillary, won, is putting in place. It's all the federal judges as well. So if you're conservative, you have to at least say, I like what he's doing on the federal and federal judge and Supreme Court level. Or guess what? You're not conservative.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Round two. We really appreciate it. Sorry for sort of the who's on the loop, but We'll get it to Willie. We will get it together for the third segment of Sykes. Exactly, versus Bolling. That we'll call that one the Thriller in Manila, and we'll get it right. So thank you guys for